By what name did many expect Elizabeth to call her son? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Luke on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Luke chapter 1. We're going to be reading from verses 57 to 66. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Luke chapter 1, beginning at verse 57. Now Elizabeth's full time came for her to be delivered, and she brought forth a son. When her neighbors and relatives heard how the Lord had shown great mercy to her, they rejoiced with her. So it was on the 8th day that they came to circumcise the child, and they would have called him by the name of his father Zacharias. His mother answered and said, "No, he shall be called John." But they said to her, "There is no one among your relatives who is called by this name." So they made signs to his father what he would have called him. And he asked for a writing tablet and wrote, saying, "His name is John." So they all marveled. Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue loosed, and he spoke, praising God. Then fear came on all who dwelt among them, and all these sayings were discussed throughout all the hill country of Judea. And all those who heard them kept them in their hearts, saying, "What kind of child will this be?" And the hand of the Lord was with him. Thus far, Luke has been providing Theophilus, and us through him, details that we have not received from our studies of Matthew and Mark. For instance, we did not know the names of John the Baptist's parents. They were Zacharias and Elisabeth. We did not know what tribe John the Baptist came from. He was a Levite. We did not know the age of John in relation to Jesus. John was 6 months older. We did not know that John the Baptist's birth was miraculous. John's parents were past childbearing years. We didn't know that an angel appeared to Mary to explain the nature of Jesus' birth. And we didn't know that Jesus and John were actually related to each other, though how close, we do not know. So there is a purpose for Luke writing his gospel, for by the time Luke wrote his gospel, there had been other writers who had written about Jesus, with Matthew being one of the ones who had been inspired of God to do that. Luke's gospel would, however, provide an orderly account, meaning that his would be largely chronological. As we continue our study, we will be finding some overlap with Matthew and Mark, but for the first 2 chapters, we find mainly brand new material. So with Elizabeth's 9 months now fulfilled, it was time for her to give birth. When her neighbors and relatives had heard that she had done so, they rejoiced with her and were thankful for the mercy that the Lord had shown to them. Recall what we said in previous lessons. Not having children was seen as a reproach among a family, possibly even a sign that the Lord was against them. Now, such was not always the case, but that didn't stop people from believing it. With the birth of a son, it proved that God had shone his grace and mercy upon that family, for he allowed them to give birth well past the natural time for doing so. And because Elizabeth gave birth to a son under the law of Moses and the covenant with Abraham, he was to be circumcised on the 8th day. When the child was brought to be circumcised, it is only natural for people to want to know what the child would be named. The people had thought that he would be named Zacharias after his father, seeing as how this boy would likely be their only child. They were surprised when Elizabeth said his name would be John. Why were they surprised? Was John a bad name or a name associated with evil? No, they were surprised because nobody in that family was named John. Even though our society has gotten away from typically naming their children after their parents, eyebrows are still raised when a child is given an unusual name. People often wonder why they picked that name, not realizing that there might have been something personally significant to the name not revealed to others. Such is the case here. John wasn't an unusual Hebrew name. It means Jehovah has been gracious, or Jehovah has shown favor, a fitting name for this child. But more importantly, this was the name that the angel Gabriel had told Zacharias to name the child. If they were to be obedient to God, they would name the child John. Not believing that Elizabeth had named the child correctly, they called Zacharias over so that they could get the name of the child. Now remember, Zacharias couldn't speak because he had disbelieved the angel when the angel appeared to him in the temple. So in order to answer their question, Zacharias needed a writing tablet. On it, to the amazement of the crowd, he wrote that the child's name would be John. Immediately after telling them this, his tongue was loosened, and Zacharias could speak again. Such an event would of course cause fear to fall on those around them, for it must have come from God. Who was the child? What was he to become? Was he to be the long-awaited Messiah? I'm sure these were all questions swirling around in their heads, and it is a question that Zacharias will answer, the Lord willing, in our next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Luke chapter 1, verses 67 to 80, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.